"You can't just cut me out of my own project," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my hands were shaking under the polished conference table. Thomas Avery didn't even look up from his laptop. The other executives shuffled papers and avoided my eyes. I watched my name disappear from the client transition deck on the screen, replaced by names of people who hadn't spent a single night fixing the systems that kept our biggest hospital network running. "We're streamlining the reporting structure," Thomas said smoothly, finally meeting my gaze with those cold blue eyes. "Nothing personal, Diane. Just business evolution, business evolution." That's what they were calling it now. I'd heard those words before, right before good people lost their jobs. But I wasn't just any employee. I was the one who built this company's entire client operations system from scratch. 10 years of late nights, missed soccer games with my son, and endless problem solving that kept million-dollar contracts from falling apart. The hospital network executives trusted me, not the company, me. Thomas knew that. Everyone in this room knew that. But here I was, watching my work get reassigned like I was nothing more than a temporary contractor whose time had run up. I should have seen this coming. I started at Meditech Analytics 11 years ago as a data analyst making barely enough to cover rent in my tiny Chicago apartment. Back then, the company had 15 employees and one major client. I was fresh out of community college with a degree that people like Thomas probably wouldn't even acknowledge as real education. My cubicle still had my diploma from Prairie State College hanging next to my son Jamie's crayon drawings. I never took them down, even after promotions. They reminded me where I came from and what I was working for. I'd built everything. The compliance tracking systems, the client reporting modules, the emergency response protocols that saved contracts when things went wrong. I trained most of the current staff, including the people who were now taking over my projects. Thomas arrived 6 months ago with his Harvard MBA and designer suits that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. The CEO brought him in to professionalize operations and scale for growth. What that really meant was replacing people like me with people like him, people with the right credentials, the right connections, the right last names. I was expendable middle management in his eyes. Thomas Avery walked into Meditech like he owned the place before he'd even unpacked his standing desk. Everything about him screamed privilege. The way he pronounced certain words, the casual mentions of vacation homes, the effortless confidence of someone who'd never had to prove themselves to get through a door. He was polite at first, smiled in meetings, asked good questions. But I noticed how his eyes glazed over when I spoke, how he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to redirect conversations, how my detailed reports would get summarized into single bullet points in his presentations. "Diane's great with the technical stuff," he'd say with that condescending smile, "but we need strategic vision at the executive level." Strategic vision apparently meant looking good in board meetings and knowing which wine to order at client dinners. It didn't include the unglamorous work of actually keeping systems running and clients happy. Within 3 months, he'd restructured my department. My title stayed the same, but my authority evaporated. Decisions I used to make independently now required his approval. Projects I'd managed for years were collaborative efforts, where my name appeared last on every document. I kept my head down and did my work. I had a mortgage. Jamie needed braces. I couldn't afford to make waves. The emails started changing first. Important discussions that used to include me suddenly happened in threads where I wasn't copied. When I asked about it, I got apologetic responses about streamlining communications and reducing inbox clutter. Then came the meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. My calendar would be empty, while everyone else huddled in the conference room discussing projects I'd started. When I questioned it, Thomas would say, "Oh, we didn't want to overload you. We know you're busy with implementation. Code word for the grunt work we don't want to do." My presentation started appearing in company decks with Thomas's name in the corner where mine used to be. charts I'd created, analyses I'd written, recommendations I'd developed, all credited to the operations leadership team, or sometimes just to Thomas directly. We're moving toward a team-based approach, HR explained when I brought it up. Individual attribution isn't as important as collective success. Funny how that only applied to my work, not to Thomas's. I documented everything, saved emails, kept copies of my original files with timestamps, not because I planned to use them, but because something in my gut told me I'd need proof someday. Everything changed the night Mercy Hospital Network threatened to cancel their contract. $50 million over 5 years, the largest deal in company history. The compliance reporting system had crashed during a federal audit, and their data looked like chaos. Thomas's team had been optimizing my original system for weeks. They'd removed what they called redundant safeguards that were actually critical backup protocols. When the system failed, they had no idea how to fix it. I got the panicked call at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday, not from Thomas, from the hospital network's operations director, Vincent Palmer, who had my personal number because we'd worked together for years. Diane, everything's down. The audit team is threatening to flag us for non-compliance. If we can't produce clean reports by Friday, we're pulling the contract. I didn't hesitate. I worked 72 hours straight, rebuilding the protocols Thomas's team had stripped away, recovering lost data from backup systems only I knew existed, and personally walking Vincent's team through every compliance checkpoint. By Thursday afternoon, the system was running perfectly. The audit passed. Mercy's executives were thrilled. On Friday, Thomas presented the results to our board. Crisis averted, thanks to quick thinking from our operations leadership team, Thomas announced, standing at the front of the boardroom while I sat in the back row. He clicked through slides showing the system recovery timeline, the audit results, the glowing feedback from Mercy executives. Every chart was mine. Every solution was mine. My name appeared once in small text on the final slide under implementation support. The board applauded. The CEO shook Thomas's hand. Someone mentioned a performance bonus. I said nothing. What could I say without sounding petty or jealous? I'd learned that women who spoke up about taking credit were seen as difficult. Team players stayed quiet and trusted that good work would be recognized eventually. But my friend Kelsey from HR found me in the parking lot that evening. Her face was tight with worry. Diane, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but they're planning a restructuring. Soon. Like next month soon, my stomach dropped. What kind of restructuring? The kind where they optimize reporting structures and eliminate redundant positions. Your name came up in the planning meeting. But I just saved the Mercy contract. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. That's why I'm warning you. Start looking. Update your resume. Because they're not planning to keep you. I drove home in silence, her words echoing in my head. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Diane, can you come to conference room B? HR needs to discuss something with you. My hands went cold. Conference room B was the small one, the one they used for private conversations nobody wanted overheard. I'd walked past it dozens of times and seen people emerge carrying boxes, faces blank with shock. The room smelled like lemon furniture polish, too strong and artificial. 3 people sat waiting. HR Director Patricia Coleman, her assistant whose name I never remembered, and Thomas. A manila folder sat on the table in front of the empty chair. Please sit down, Patricia said with a practiced smile. This isn't disciplinary. We want to make that clear up front. When someone tells you a conversation isn't disciplinary before you've even sat down, it's never good news. We're restructuring the operations department, she continued as I lowered myself into the chair, creating a new vertical reporting structure that consolidates several positions. Unfortunately, your current role is being absorbed into Thomas's direct management team. The words hung in the air like smoke. Absorbed. Such a clinical word for erased. I don't understand, I said, though I understood perfectly. The Mercy contract was excellent work, Thomas interrupted smoothly, which is why we're offering a generous severance package. The folder contained 6 weeks of salary and benefits, a standard liability waiver, a non-disparagement clause, and a letter of recommendation so generic it could have been written for anyone. We appreciate everything you've contributed to Meditech, Patricia said. This is simply about evolving our leadership structure. My throat felt tight, but I refused to cry. Not here, not in front of them. I'd given this company 11 years. I'd built systems that made them millions. I'd saved their biggest contract just weeks ago. And this was my reward. I need a few days to review this, I managed to say. Unfortunately, we need an answer today, Patricia replied. If you choose not to sign, we'll have to proceed with immediate termination for structural elimination. The severance offer expires at 5 p.m. I looked at Thomas. He avoided my eyes, examining his perfectly manicured fingernails like they were the most interesting thing in the room. I signed. What choice did I have? Single mom, mortgage, health insurance. I couldn't afford to fight. 20 minutes later, I was packing my cubicle into a cardboard box. My diploma, Jamie's drawings, the coffee mug that said, "World's Best Problem Solver," that my team had given me 3 birthdays ago. The intern wouldn't look at me. Nobody would. I carried my box to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited alone. I drove home with the radio off, letting the silence fill my car like water. The city blurred past my windows. Traffic lights changed colors I barely registered. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. 11 years. Gone in a 20-minute meeting. Jamie was at school. The apartment was empty. I set the box on the kitchen counter and stared at it. Everything I'd built, reduced to objects that fit in 18 inches of cardboard. My phone buzzed. Text messages from former co-workers. Are you okay? Can't believe they did this. So sorry to hear the news. News traveled fast. Of course it did. I'd probably been the subject of whispered conversations all morning. Poor Diane. Such a shame. But you know how these things go. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at my kitchen table, looking at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. The anger started somewhere deep in my chest, a small flame that grew hotter with each breath. They thought I was replaceable. They thought my work was just technical stuff that anyone could do. They thought keeping me quiet with severance and a liability waiver would be enough. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. Then I stopped on a name I hadn't called in weeks. Angela Ruiz answered on the second ring. Diane? I was just thinking about you. That compliance save last month was absolutely brilliant. Vincent still talks about how you fixed everything in 3 days. Angela was the new CEO of Mercy Hospital Network, brought in 6 months ago to modernize their operations. We'd met 3 years earlier at a healthcare analytics certification program. She was brilliant, demanding, and had 0 patience for incompetence or office politics. We'd stayed in touch, coffee every few months, occasional text messages about industry news. She'd always said if she ever needed someone who truly understood healthcare data systems, I'd be her first call. Thanks, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. That project was intense. Intense but masterful. The board was incredibly impressed. Actually, I've been meaning to reach out. We're expanding our data operations team, and I'd love to pick your brain about system architecture. My heart started beating faster. I'd be happy to help. Great. Are you free for coffee this Friday? There's a new place downtown that's supposed to be amazing. I hesitated. Should I tell her I'd been fired? Would it make me look weak or damaged? Friday works perfectly, I said. I'll text you the time. After we hung up, I sat holding my phone, staring at Angela's name on the screen. Maybe this wasn't over after all. Friday morning, I met Angela at a downtown cafe with exposed brick walls and the smell of fresh espresso filling the air. She was already there, reviewing something on her tablet, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun. "Diane!" She stood and hugged me. "You look great." "Well, except you look tired. They working you too hard at Meditech?" I sat down, wrapping my hands around the coffee cup the barista brought. "Actually, I'm no longer with Meditech." Her eyebrows shot up. "What? When did this happen?" "Tuesday. They restructured my position out of existence after you saved our contract." Angela's voice sharpened. "Are you serious right now?" I nodded, surprised by the genuine anger in her face. Apparently, I wasn't the right fit for their new strategic direction. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." She leaned forward. "Diane, you're the only reason we stayed with them. When Vincent told me about the compliance crisis, he said you personally rebuilt their entire reporting system in 72 hours. Alone. Thomas Avery got the credit for that save," I said quietly. "Thomas?" She practically spat the name. "That guy who showed up to our last review meeting and couldn't answer basic questions about our data architecture? The one who kept using buzzwords instead of actual technical knowledge?" I couldn't help but smile. "That's him. He's an idiot." Angela sat back, studying me. "So what's your plan now?" "Honestly?" "I'm still figuring it out," I admitted. "I've been updating my resume, reaching out to contacts. The severance gives me about 6 weeks to find something." Angela was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. "What if I told you we've been unhappy with Meditech's service lately?" My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Since you left, things have been falling apart. Small things at first. Reports coming in late, data inconsistencies. Last week, we had another compliance flag because their automated systems didn't catch a documentation gap. Vincent is furious." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, not sure where this was going. "Don't be sorry. It confirms what I already suspected. You weren't just an employee at Meditech. You were the backbone. Everything good about their service came from you." She leaned forward again, "Which makes me wonder something. Would you consider consulting with us directly, not through Meditech, independently?" The question hung in the air between us. It was risky. Meditech could claim I was stealing clients or violating non-compete agreements. But I'd been careful. I'd read every word of my severance package. There was no non-compete clause because Patricia had rushed the paperwork. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked. "Let me talk to our board and legal team." "But I'm thinking contract work, system audits, maybe ongoing support. We'd pay consultant rates." I left the cafe feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Angela promised to call me within 3 days after speaking with Mercy's board and attorneys. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Kelsey. "You won't believe what's happening here. Thomas's team is completely lost. They keep asking if you left documentation for the Mercy protocols. Systems are glitching again." I smiled but didn't respond. Let them figure it out. I'd built those systems to be maintainable by anyone with basic technical knowledge and attention to detail. If they were struggling, it wasn't because of missing documentation. It was because they'd never bothered to learn how anything actually worked. Another text came through, this one from Vincent Palmer at Mercy. "Hey Diane, hope you're doing well. Quick question. Do you happen to have time for a call next week? Having some issues with the reporting modules and Thomas's team isn't being responsive." I screenshot the message and filed it away, not to use vindictively, but as evidence that the wheels were already coming off. Sunday night, Angela called. The board approved it. "They want you consulting with us starting immediately. 20 hours a week minimum. Are you interested in hearing the terms?" "Absolutely." Consultant rate of $200 per hour. Direct contract with Mercy, not through Meditech. We'll need you to audit our entire data compliance system and make recommendations $4,000 a week, more than I'd been making at Meditech as a full employee, for 20 hours instead of the 60 I'd been working. Yes, I said without hesitation. When do I start? How about tomorrow? I'll have legal email you the contract this evening. I read the contract 3 times, checking every clause. It was clean, no conflicts, no restrictions, just straightforward consulting work for a client who valued my expertise. I signed it at 11 p.m. Sunday night and emailed it back. Monday morning, instead of job hunting, I was back at Mercy Hospital Network's headquarters. Vincent greeted me like a long-lost friend. "Thank God you're here," he said, walking me to a conference room. "Everything's been falling apart since you left Meditech. We've had 3 compliance flags in 2 weeks. The reporting system keeps generating corrupted files, and when we call Thomas's team, they take days to respond and can't fix anything. I spent 4 hours examining their systems. The problems were obvious. Thomas's team had continued optimizing my protocols, removing safeguards, and simplifying complex processes until nothing worked correctly anymore. This is fixable, I told Vincent, but I need direct access to your servers and about 2 weeks of focused work. Whatever you need. Angela's authorized full access. She's calling the board this afternoon. I worked 12-hour days that week, rebuilding what Thomas's incompetence had destroyed. By Friday, Mercy's systems were running better than they had in months. All compliance flags were resolved. Reports generated perfectly. The audit team gave them a clean review. Angela called me into her office Friday afternoon. The board is thrilled. They want to know if you'd be open to expanding the contract. What did you have in mind? Full-time VP of Client Data Operations. Direct employee, not contractor. We're building a new internal team to manage all our healthcare analytics. We want someone who actually knows what they're doing to lead it. Someone we trust. The offer she described included a salary 50% higher than what I'd made at Meditech. Full benefits, stock options, a title that reflected what I actually did instead of diminishing it. There's one complication, Angela continued. We're still technically under contract with Meditech for another 8 months. If we terminate early, there's a penalty clause. Unless we can demonstrate breach of service quality standards, I thought about the screenshots Kelsey had sent. The documented system failures, the delayed responses, the compliance flags that had appeared after I left. I might be able to help with that documentation, I said carefully. Angela smiled. I thought you might. I'd always been meticulous about documentation. Every email saved, every project time-stamped, every system design documented with my name and date in the metadata. Not because I plan to use it against anyone, but because that's how you build systems that last. Now those habits were about to save me. I compiled a timeline of everything I'd built at Meditech. The compliance protocols, the reporting modules, the emergency response procedures. Every piece had my digital fingerprint embedded in the code comments and file properties. Then I documented every system failure that had occurred since my termination. The compliance flags at Mercy, the corrupted reports, the delayed response times from Thomas's team. I didn't hack anything or access files illegally. I just used publicly available information and records Mercy had every right to possess as a client. Angela's legal team reviewed everything. Their eyes got wider with each page. This is ironclad, the lead attorney said. Meditech's service quality has demonstrably declined since Ms. Reynolds' departure. We have grounds to terminate for cause without penalty. But there is more we can do, Angela said, looking at me. How would you feel about one more consulting project before you officially join our team? What kind of project? She smiled. The kind that ensures Meditech understands exactly what they lost. The joint review meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Standard quarterly check-in between Mercy's board and Meditech's executive team. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was just a former employee, a consultant now working independently. But Angela had other plans. The meeting started normally. Thomas presented slides about service metrics and client satisfaction. The numbers were carefully curated to hide the recent problems. Everything looked perfect on paper. Then Angela interrupted. These metrics don't match our internal data. We've documented multiple service failures in the past 3 weeks. System crashes, compliance flags, delayed response times. This presentation doesn't reflect reality. Thomas's face went red. There may have been some minor technical issues during a transition period, but where's Diane Reynolds? Angela asked, cutting him off. I'd like her to join this discussion. The silence in the room was deafening. Thomas glanced at the Meditech CEO. Patricia from HR looked at her notes. Nobody spoke. Ms. Reynolds is no longer with our company, Thomas finally said. We restructured. You fired the one person who actually kept our systems running, Angela said flatly. And ever since, your service quality has collapsed. So here's what's going to happen. We're terminating our contract with Meditech effective immediately for breach of service standards. Thomas tried to recover. You can't terminate without penalty. The contract is clear. We can when you fail to meet quality standards, Angela interrupted. Our legal team has documented everything. Unless you'd like us to present this evidence to the Industry Standards Board, I suggest you accept termination without contest. The Meditech CEO finally spoke. Angela, surely we can work something out. We value this partnership. You valued Diane. You just didn't know it. Angela stood. This meeting is over. Our attorneys will be in touch regarding contract termination details. She walked out. I followed her, keeping my face neutral, even though my heart was racing. Behind us, I could hear urgent whispered conversations and someone's phone ringing repeatedly. In the parking lot, Angela turned to me. That felt good. That felt terrifying, I admitted. Welcome to VP-level decision-making, she laughed. Your official start date is Monday. We'll announce the new data operations division and your appointment on Friday. Think you can handle building a department from scratch? I've done it before. Not like this. This time, you'll have budget, authority, and a team that reports to you. No more having your work stolen. I smiled. When do I start recruiting? The news hit the industry like a bomb. Mercy Hospital Network, one of the largest healthcare systems in the Midwest, had terminated their contract with Meditech Analytics and was building an internal data operations team led by a former Meditech manager. My phone exploded with messages, former colleagues congratulating me, recruiters asking if I was hiring, and one very interesting email from Kelsey. Diane, it's chaos here. The CEO called an emergency board meeting. Thomas is being grilled about what happened. They're demanding to know why you were let go and who approved it. Patricia is trying to claim it was a mutual decision. Nobody's buying it. Also, I'm updating my resume. Any chance you're hiring HR people? I forwarded her email to Angela with a note. Thoughts on an HR director who actually understands employee value? Angela responded in minutes. Have her send me her resume. Wednesday afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Diane, it's Thomas. My jaw clenched. I'm surprised they let you make personal calls. We need to talk. Off the record, his voice had lost all its polished confidence. He sounded desperate. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, just 5 minutes. There might be a way to fix this. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop. Neutral territory. Part of me knew it was petty to enjoy watching him squirm, but after months of condescension and having my work stolen, I wasn't feeling particularly generous. He looked terrible. His perfect hair was messy. His suit was wrinkled. He'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. Thank you for meeting me, he started, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup he wasn't drinking. You have 4 minutes left. The board is furious. They're talking about terminating my contract. The CEO wants to know how we lost Mercy. He looked up at me. You could help fix this. How? Talk to Angela. Explain that the transition was handled poorly, but Meditech can still provide quality service. Maybe consult with us to rebuild the systems. We'd pay you well. Really well. I let the silence stretch between us, watched him squirm, let him feel a fraction of the powerlessness I'd felt in that conference room when they fired me. No, I finally said. Diane, please. You took credit for my work. You marginalized me in meetings. You convinced the executives I was expendable. And when I saved your biggest client, you didn't even acknowledge my name. I stood up. So no, Thomas, I'm not going to save you. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within a week, Meditech's stock dropped 15% as news spread about losing their largest client. 2 other hospital systems quietly contacted Angela to ask about switching to her new internal model. Thomas was terminated with cause. No severance, no glowing recommendations. Just a quiet exit and a non-disclosure agreement. Patricia from HR took early retirement. The CEO issued a statement about strategic realignment that fooled nobody. Industry newsletters ran stories. Healthcare analytics firm loses flagship client after firing key employee. My name appeared in several articles, so did Angela's. Thomas's name was conspicuously absent. I hired Kelsey as my HR director. She started the following Monday and immediately helped me build a recruiting plan. We were looking for talent that had been overlooked elsewhere. People from state schools, career changers, single parents who needed flexibility, anyone who'd been told they weren't strategic enough. Within 3 weeks, I had a team of 8. Within 6 weeks, we'd rebuilt Mercy's entire data infrastructure from the ground up. It was better than anything Meditech had ever provided. And 3 months after I was fired, 2 of Mercy's partner hospital systems signed contracts with us instead of renewing with Meditech. The email arrived on a Friday morning. Subject line, Meditech Analytics Restructuring Announcement. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. The company was being sold. After 4 consecutive quarters of declining revenue and multiple lost contracts, the board had accepted an acquisition offer from a larger competitor. The purchase price was significantly lower than Meditech's peak valuation. Most employees would be let go during the integration. Only core technical staff would be retained. The Chicago office would close. I forwarded it to my team without comment. Several of them had started their careers at Meditech. They deserved to know. Kelsey came to my office an hour later. Did you see the news? Just read it. How do you feel? I thought about that. How did I feel watching the company that fired me essentially collapse? I expected to feel vindicated, triumphant, maybe a little guilty. Instead, I mostly felt sad. Sad for the good people who'd lose their jobs. Sad for the clients who'd have to transition systems again. Sad that it had come to this. I feel like they did it to themselves, I said finally. They valued credentials over competence, image over integrity, and it caught up with them. That afternoon, I got a call from someone I never expected to hear from again. Jonathan Pierce, the former CEO of Meditech. Diane, I owe you an apology. I said nothing, waiting. I should have fought harder to keep you. I should have recognized what you brought to the company. Thomas convinced me you were just technical support, but he was wrong. You were the foundation. Everything else was built on... Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because I'm watching everything I built fall apart, and I realized it started falling apart the day we let you go. I wanted you to know that I understand that now. His voice cracked slightly. This wasn't a manipulation attempt. It was genuine regret from someone watching their legacy crumble. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. but it doesn't change what happened. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right. Merit does outlast pedigree. I wish I'd understood that sooner. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. The apology didn't fix anything. It didn't undo the humiliation or the fear or the nights I'd stayed awake worrying about money. But it did feel like closing a chapter. 6 months after my firing, I walked past the Meditech building on my way to a meeting downtown. The office was mostly empty now. Through the glass windows, I could see furniture covered in white sheets, abandoned cubicles. The receptionist desk where I'd signed in every morning for 11 years sat unmanned. A crew was taking down the company sign from the building's facade. The letters that had once seemed so permanent were being unbolted one by one, leaving dark shadows on the concrete where they'd hung. I stopped on the sidewalk, coffee in hand, watching the M fall away, then the E, then the D. A year ago, watching this would have devastated me. That building represented everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built. Seeing it dismantled would have felt like watching my own failure. But now? Now I walked past with my head high, wearing a suit I'd bought to celebrate my new position, carrying a portfolio for a meeting where I'd be presenting to executives who actually valued my expertise. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I just felt free. The last letter fell. I took a sip of my coffee and kept walking. My son Jamie asked me once what I learned from everything that happened. He was doing a school project about overcoming challenges, and he wanted to interview me. I thought carefully before answering. What had I learned from being fired, from fighting back, from watching karma work its way through a company that had discarded me? I learned that your value doesn't come from what people think of you, I told him. It comes from what you actually do, the work you produce, the relationships you build, the problems you solve. But they fired you even though you were good at your job, he pointed out with the brutal honesty of a 12-year-old. They did, because they measured value by the wrong things. They cared about diplomas and connections instead of results, and that mistake cost them everything. So what's the lesson? I smiled. That merit outlasts pedigree. Always. It might take time. It might require patience, but eventually, people who deliver results will outlast people who just look good in meetings. He wrote that down in his notebook, his handwriting still awkward and unformed. Then he looked up at me. Mom, I'm proud of you. Those 4 words meant more than any promotion or salary increase ever could. I'd lost a job, but I'd gained something more valuable, proof that my worth wasn't defined by people who couldn't see it, and that was a lesson worth learning, even if it came the hard way.